Good morning, everybody. Thank you for clicking on and watching the introduction to the Manufacturers and Distributors Committee. My name's Jim Kirk. I work with Deadline Products, and I've been involved with the Manufacturers and Distributors Committee at the BPCA for probably about the last 4 or 5 years or so, including a couple of years as my stint as chairman. So I've been asked if I'd just do a quick few minutes to introduce to members who the committee are and what we do. So if we just move on. So obviously the BPCA is a not-for-profit organisation. It's very much a member for members organisation determined to promote the interests of the professional pest control industry. The way it's organised is there's an executive board and then a number of committees who effectively work in parts of the organisation who report in through the board. We are one of those boards. So in terms of who makes up the M&D committee, obviously the BPCA predominantly is made up of pest control servicing companies, both large and small, are out there providing pest control services to customers. We're a much smaller group of membership. So we are people who produce pest control products, or we store and distribute pest control products on behalf of those servicing companies. So we are a much smaller group. However, like the other committees of the board, the servicing committee, etc., we follow exactly the same codes of reference, just like the other committees. We meet regularly, usually about once a quarter, either at the BPCA offices or in the way of the modern world, virtually. So what do we do? So we're a group of people who, in terms of our relationships between each other, we're suppliers of each other, we're customers of each other and competitors as well. But we do share some common goals, and those common goals are often better served being approached on the level of an industry rather than an individual company. So there's a few examples of that. So a key one would be product stewardship. So for example, the authorities inform us that they have concerns about the environmental impacts of a certain active ingredient. We may have 3 or 4 M&D members who have utilise active ingredients. They might want to get together to spread cost of data sharing, for example, or to approach the authorities as a group and as an industry, as opposed to just individual companies with individual commercial concerns. So it's often better that we group together and pool our resources for that sort of activity. It's the sort of thing that we've been relatively successful with in the past. It's obviously a very tricky task, but one good example of when we have been successful with that is, I think about 3 years ago or so now, we have a number of pheromone-based products in the industry, which are largely used for monitoring and trapping as opposed to control. But because they did kill some of their target species, they were looking very much at bringing these products under the biocidal product registration auspices, which meant they were going to regulate them, and effectively all the products in that category would really have failed because they're not designed for control. So they would have been effectively removed from market. So a number of M&D members would have been negatively impacted by that, as well as servicing companies downstream who have been no longer able to access that solution. So we managed to successfully lobby the authorities to remove that requirement for that product group. So these are all sort of examples of what we do during our meetings. Other things we do as well is we work with authorities to understand what the issues of the day are, really, with a view to then taking some sort of mitigating action in order to remove or lessen some of the negative impacts that pest control as an industry would incur as a result. So we produce, for example, best practice documentation. So you may have seen things like best practice guidance for glue boards coming out recently. You'll have seen some best practice documentation for use of insecticides. That's work that's done through the M&D committee. We've also got an ongoing project looking at the regulation of snap traps. The authorities are being lobbied at the moment around regulating the use of breakback traps and how that's going to work. So we're trying to come up with a framework so that we can effectively self-regulate and avoid anything untoward being enforced downwards on us at a time when we're trying to look at physical control as a much more important way of dealing with pest issues. So how do we impact you? So by you, I'm making the assumption now that you're a member of a servicing company, and say, well, what do these M&D sort of bonds really have to do with me? Well, the main impact really is that how successful or unsuccessful we are at maintaining uses and maintaining products on market has a direct impact on how servicing operators can go about doing their business. So everybody in the UK, and elsewhere as well for the most part, work within the constraints of labels and product registrations. They're increasingly important and they're increasingly detailed and have an increasing number of restrictions on there. Now, that is a result of the authorities really having an enhanced level now compared to maybe previous years of concern over environmental issues that a product or an active or a use of that product or active may have. They're increasingly concerned about accidental impacts on non-target species. And so these concerns are creating restrictions on where we can use products and how we can use products. And that's getting onto the label, which is in turn obviously impacting service businesses in terms of how they operate. Now, we know that this is a concern for service businesses because they tell us, which is great. And it's really quite difficult to keep on top of. The regulatory framework is changing all the time. So one of the things we try to do is keep on top of that, because we do get a little bit of advanced sight as manufacturers and product developers and producers, in order to try and then inform the BPCA members, via our committee structure, about what's likely to be coming downstream. So, for example, during this PestExtra event, I believe there's a round table that I'm involved in to discuss the future of insecticides. So that's effectively all around discussing what the regulatory framework's likely to be now, 2 years' time, 5 years' time, and how that might impact people going around treating wasp nests, for example. So we try to stay on top of that and give people advanced sight where that's possible, as well as obviously sharing our technical knowledge that we have in terms of usage and control of the products. So that's the key area of impact for you guys. It's what happens with our development of new products and new solutions, and success we have on keeping all the solutions available on the market. It does have that very direct link to how service and businesses can operate. But obviously the M&D committee is just one part of the BPCA. There's other member groups. So servicing group is the biggest by some distance, but it's not the only one. There's consultant members as well, and associate members. So we're quite keen to discuss and talk and interact with other members of the BPCA, other groups in the BPCA, essentially because, well, putting it simply, half of our agenda comes from there. So broadly speaking, half of the things that we look at as an M&D committee will be driven downstream from authorities and decisions that have been taken by regulators. And about half of the agenda is driven by what servicing businesses are telling us. So I'll give you a few issues that are in and around or have been on the agenda recently that have been driven by interaction with servicing members. So one of those is bee control. So the issue there is we have a situation where bees predominantly shouldn't be controlled by chemical means, certainly. So bees should either be just left alone. If they pose a risk, they should be moved. And only if they cannot be moved and they pose a direct public health risk can they be chemically controlled. Now, due to how the biocidal pest regulations are being enacted, it's very likely we will no longer have any products at all registered in this country for use on bees in the next 2 or 3 years. So that opens the question, well, what do we do in that situation? So these are the kinds of questions that members are coming to us with that we can then try and take an industry stance on to approach the authorities about. There's another issue around field mice. So on, for example, on rodenticide labels recently, you may have noticed that rats and mice has now been changed to brown rat and house mouse specifically, and excluding non-target species like the field mice, which is generally not a target species, generally speaking. But again, we get situations on a relatively frequent basis where field mice are coming indoors and posing a public health risk. So what do we do in that situation? Technically speaking, using rodenticide on them would be illegal because it's a non-target species. So again, these kind of concerns that are coming up from the membership are things that we like to pick up and try to champion with the authorities in order to try and get some sort of resolution to that. So we're very much there to sort of help and support the membership as much as anything else, really, because the membership is predominantly our customer base, and supporting customers is what we all do, really, at the end of the day. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour of who the M&D are, what we do, and a little bit about how we operate, sorts of issues that we try to get involved in. If you do have any questions, there's my name, there's my number. I think I'm feeling a little bit brave, actually. I've put my mobile number on there. I've just thought that now when I flick the screen. But I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. But yeah, any servicing companies have questions, or if any manufacturers, distributors who are not members of the M&D community with BPCA want to find out a little bit more, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.